Hello, my name is Austin England, and this is my APUSH History Project. And let me just say, before we begin with all the history stuff, that I hate video cameras. I already took this at least a dozen and a half times, and every single time there'll be at least one thing that goes wrong, one thing that makes me re-record it. But I guess it's a good thing, because the other ones were bad, about as bad as this person's YouTube videos. Well, anyways, I'm sorry about this video, because you're going to have to stare at my face for a prolonged amount of time, but at least you'll get to hear about history. And you can always just stare at the map behind me. That's what it's there for. Anyways, this video will be split up into 4 different parts, each one talking about a different European country's approach to settling in the Americas. The first part will be about the Dutch, which is weird, because you never really hear much about the Dutch. We all know that the French settled in Canada, Spanish settled in New Spain or Mexico, and that the English settled in New England, which later became the United States of America. But you never really hear much about the Dutch. But they all started when they won independence from Catholic Spain with the help of England. And this led to the 17th century being the golden age of Dutch civilization with artists like Rembrandt. And they finally became a global power, and they challenged England, their former ally. So I guess to thank them for helping them become global power, they challenged them to a war. Okay. This led to 3 Anglo-Dutch wars with 100 ships on each side, 40 of them being men of war, which are giant warships. After these conflicts, the Dutch used 2 companies to settle the Americas, the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company. The Dutch East India Company was enormously profitable for over 300 years. They hired Henry Hudson in 1609, and he explored the Delaware and New York Bay. He also discovered, but not really, because it had always been there, and the Indians had been there millions of times. But nevertheless, he discovered the Hudson River, and he named it after himself, and he believed it to be a passage through the entire continent of America. But he was completely wrong, because no such thing exists. Then the less powerful Dutch West India Company settled in the Caribbean, and they were more interested in raiding than making their own way in life. I guess they were failures or something. But they plundered a Spanish fleet in 1628 and took $15 million worth of treasure. Okay, maybe not. The Dutch also settled in the New Netherlands near the Hudson River around 1623, 1624, up in this area. And they settled in New Amsterdam, which is modern-day New York, that they bought for pennies per acre from Indians, because they did not really believe in owning any property. And they ran miserable company towns with hardly any freedom. Another way they settled was by patroonships, which were vast feudal estates granted to promoters with 50 people or more. This led to New Netherlands being very diverse. And in 1654, 23 Jews arrived there to escape religious persecution. And one time it was observed that 18 different languages were being spoken there, and now you can observe over 200 being spoken in that area. That is it for the Dutch. The next European country I'll talk about is Spain. Their philosophy in the New World is basically kill or convert the Indians and get gold. That's not a very good philosophy. They just wanted to kill everyone and take their stuff. Okay. And this led to the encomienda system, which was basically slavery. It was when a Native American was given to someone for labor, in exchange for that person converting them to Christianity. Even though the person did not always convert them, even if they did, it's not a very good reason. Bartolome de las Casas was quoted as saying the encomienda system is a moral pestilence invented by Satan. See, pretty serious. The conquerors of the South and Central Americas were called conquistadors. One such conqueror was Hernan Cortez, who in 1519 conquered the capital of the Aztecs. Many other conquistadors captured other Native American groups, such as Francisco Pizarro and the Incans. These conquistadors helped lead to the Black Legend, which is the myth that Spaniards only killed and tortured the Native Americans. That's not all they did. Oh no. They also built a vast empire in the New World, with the help of the killing and the torturing. So they had the killing and the torturing on the bottom as the foundation, and on top they had this vast empire. But it wouldn't have been able to happen without them killing the Indians. Next up is the English, who are different than both the Dutch and the Spanish. The first permanent English colony was founded in Jamestown by the Virginia Company, which is a joint stock company from London. The main attraction to the Americas was the chance of finding gold and getting a passage to the Indies, which was basically the goal of almost every single country that settled in the Americas. The Virginia Company only intended to last a few years and then reap the profits, so this greatly pressured the colonists because if they did not make a quick profit, they would be abandoned in the wilderness. Basically, the bosses wanted them to make money, and if they didn't, they would die. But then they died anyways because they didn't have a fend for themselves, and so they just kept raiding nearby Native Americans, and they took their stuff. They called these Native Americans the Powhatans, and they named them after their leader, whose name was Powhatan. Powhatan had conquered several nearby tribes, and at first thought that the English could be his allies. However, the relationship became very tense because, they kept taking his stuff. And it became even worse when Delaware arrived in 1610. He declared war on the Powhatans and raided villages, burned houses, confiscated provisions, and torched cornfields. A peace settlement later ended this first Anglo-Powhatan War. This was sealed by the first interracial union in Virginia, John Rolfe and Pocahontas. A fragile peace followed this war for 8 years, but the Indians grew tired and tried attacking the settlers. They killed 347 settlers, including John Rolfe. Virginia Company ordered for a war without peace that would make the Powhatans no longer exist. That sounds final, I guess. After the Second Anglo-Powhatan War, the Powhatan were banished, and by 1685 they were considered extinct. So, there was, of course, no Third Anglo-Powhatan War. And something else that helped greatly speed up the death of the Powhatan race was diseases, such as smallpox. The English settlers were very similar to the Spanish in their treatment of Indians, and that's not a good thing. But they are very different in their political ways, which is a good thing. Because the English settlers tried creating a more democratic country with assemblages like the House of Burgesses in 1619. The English also migrated many more people, whereas the Dutch, French, and Spanish just intermarried with the local people. The new English settlers brought over new ideas of religious freedom, with colonies like Maryland being a safe haven for Catholics and Pennsylvania being founded for the Quakers. Places where these early English colonists settled were very prosperous and led to a great amount of cash crops, which led to a shortage in labor, which also made the colonists turn to slavery, which is another thing that is not so good. And that also led to more conflict, such as the Civil War later on down the road. The last country I'll talk about is France. They called their settlement New France. Wow, how original. Just like all the rest of them, I guess. Spain had New Spain. England had New England. France had New France. And the Dutch had the New Netherlands. And they all shared, you guessed it, the New World. Wow. There must not have very much creativity in the New World. Except maybe in the way they tortured and killed the Indians. Anyways, whatever. This last talk about is France and their settlement, New France. The father of New France was named Samuel de Champlain. He is very friendly with the nearby Indians, and he helped defeat their enemy, Iroquois. So this led to a lasting friendship between the Huron Indians and the French, and a lasting hatred between the Iroquois and the French. French colonists were ruled by their king, and they did not have trial by jury, nor did they elect representatives. They didn't have very much freedom, but they liked it that way. And this means it was very different from the early English settlements. The population of Catholic New France grew very, very slowly. Around 1750, only 60,000 whites lived in New France. This was because nobody had a reason to move. Landowners had no reason, and the Protestants, who did have a reason, were not allowed to leave France. The mainland of France also mostly favored their Caribbean colonies because they made more money than their northern Canadian colonies. I guess it's because nobody likes Canada, I guess. There's one valuable resource in Canada, though, the beaver. Fur trappers began killing beavers and selling their fur back to France. They even lured local natives to help them in their business. These trappers nearly made the beaver extinct. And also, some French Catholic missionaries came over because they tried to convert Indians to Christianity. They were tortured and made very few convert. So the three main things the French sought for in the New World were fur, souls, and empire. The French tried to stop the expansion of the British and Spanish by planting several colonies near their borders, but this did not stop them for long. In conclusion, the French, Dutch, Spanish, and English had very different ways of selling in the Americas. The Spanish and English treated the natives very poorly, while the French and Dutch treated them much better and integrated them into society. But they still tortured them and killed them from time to time. Wow. The English wanted to establish a more democratic society, but the French, Dutch, and Spanish were content with leaving their government exactly the same. The English also had much more freedom than the other country settlements. One of the main motives for settlement to the French and Spanish were also converting the local natives to Christianity. The Spanish, Dutch, and French lived their Indian neighbors and married them, while the English lived separate. In other words, the English were much different than the rest of the early settlements, just like they are today. Go America. Wow, that was bad. That last part kept stumbling over my words. It's over now. And in case you're wondering, everything on my desk definitely has to do with history, especially this one. Well, this is the end of my video. Hopefully it was okay. I know it looks like a bad YouTube video, but hopefully it's a good project and you all liked it. Thank you for watching this video. I know it didn't look too well, but it looks like a bad YouTube video. But hopefully the actual content is pretty good. And of course I had to go first. I had to present first. But at least it was a video. And remember how earlier I said that the first videos I made were very terrible? Well, I sent this to one of my friends and asked her what she thought. She basically said, "They're boring. You were boring it." I said, "Well, sorry. Sorry for being me. I sound boring." Someone even said I should narrate an audiobook. Whatever. That's the end of this video. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. And once again, I apologize for you having to stare at my face. DFTBU, which means don't forget to be ugly.